Good morning. Yesterday, when we talked about ancient Rome, we talked about one of the most famous Romans ever, Julius Caesar. And we learned how he died in 44 BC, which was before Christ, before the Common Era. And we are going to learn about another very famous Roman. And this guy you maybe have heard of actually in the Bible. If you have read that story, his name actually comes up when we talk about when Jesus was born and why Jesus was born, where he was born, had to do with something that this Roman emperor decided to decree. So it's very interesting how everything ties together, and we can know a lot about people from many different sources in history. So illustrious. Illustrious is a great vocabulary word. It means famous or outstanding, well known because of one's accomplishment. Illustrious. Influence. The power to have a compelling and persuasive effect on people or things. An influence. Parched. Extremely dry due to heat and lack of rain. Predecessor. A person who has held a position before the current position holder. And vast means very big, gigantic. So if you have a vast area, you have a gigantic. Ooh, that would be a good one. It's even easy to spell, but it's so much a better word. It's not a kindergarten word. It's going to take your writing to fourth grade level, which is what we're aiming for. By the time we get to the end of third grade, we want you writing in great fourth grade sentences. So use the word vast instead of very big. This chapter is titled Augustus Caesar and the Roman Empire. Now, when we learned about the life of Julius Caesar and how he worked to expand the Roman territory and laid the groundwork for changing the way Rome's whole government worked. There has been a progression of Rome's rulers from kings to a republic of senators and consuls to a dictator, which is who Caesar was. And then we're going to be moving on even beyond what a dictator is. So here are some sentences that will have some transition words in them. So listen to these transition words, and it helps you know how to put things in order in a paragraph that you're writing. First, Rome and the surrounding areas were divided into many different kingdoms ruled by Etruscan kings. Then, after the people overthrew the Etruscan kings, Rome became a republic. Finally, when Julius Caesar ruled Rome, he ruled as a dictator, a person who was not elected and had ultimate control of the government. You heard first, then, finally. Those are good transition words, super basic, and we will move on from using those super basic transition words. Just like with other vocabulary words, you will never use the word big in your writing. You would think big, but before it comes out of your brain and down your arm and through your pencil onto a piece of paper, you will have changed that into something like vast, which is so much of a better vocabulary word and better for your writing. So today, you're going to hear about the steps in the progression of Rome's government, how Rome became an empire. An empire usually consists of an area of land that's much larger than a kingdom. An empire's vast area of land consists of many different regions ruled by an emperor. So listen carefully to hear empire and emperor in today's read aloud. During his life, Julius Caesar had a few close friends, the closest of which was Mark Antony. Mark Antony was a general under Julius Caesar and helped in the conquering of Gaul over Vercingetorix. Julius Caesar did not have any sons that could take over his position as emperor of Rome. In his will, Julius Caesar adopted his 18-year-old great-nephew Octavian as his own son. After Caesar's death, Mark Antony and Octavian worked together to fight against Julius Caesar's enemies and resolve some of the conflict in the empire, at least for a while. So this is Mark Antony, a good friend of Julius Caesar. And this is Octavian, Caesar's adopted son. They worked together against the enemies of Julius Caesar, the ones who would have killed him on the Ides of March in 44 BC. They formed an alliance. What does that mean? It means they are working together against a common enemy. I love a good map. During Julius Caesar's time, Rome's border had expanded far beyond Italy and far beyond the coastlines of the Mediterranean Sea. Look at these new borders. So this is before, this very dark red is before Caesar, a little bit in North Africa. But here at the time of Caesar's death, all of Gaul has been conquered and many areas sort of bordering what had already been conquered. So it's expanding outward. By the time of Julius Caesar's death, Rome included a number of provinces or areas outside of the city of Rome, controlled and governed by Roman generals. This map shows in orange and red all the lands that Rome controlled at the time of Julius Caesar's death. The generals in charge of these areas were supposed to take orders from the Roman Senate. Mark Antony took it upon himself to make sure Rome and Egypt continued to be allies because Rome needed to keep importing Egypt's wheat. Plus, Cleopatra's Egypt was a rich and powerful country with a strong army, not as powerful as Rome, but still an important force in the Mediterranean area with which to have an alliance. Just as Julius Caesar had done, Mark Antony fell in love with Cleopatra, and she fell in love with him. In fact, they became one of the most famous couples in history. William Shakespeare, the playwright that you heard about earlier, who wrote the play Julius Caesar, also wrote another play about this couple entitled Antony and Cleopatra. Mark Antony and Cleopatra became allies in a struggle for power with Octavian. So the alliance between Octavian and Mark Antony has now broken down because Mark Antony feels as though he can be much stronger than Octavian. Even though Mark Antony and Octavian had worked together in an alliance to end Rome's civil war, they eventually became enemies. It seems like this is the way things turned out in Roman politics, isn't it? Since the beginning of Roman history, starting with Romulus and Remus, right on through Julius Caesar and Brutus and beyond, allies often became bitter enemies. Octavian won the war against Mark Antony and Cleopatra. He went on to become the most powerful Roman leader at the time, with influence over most of the senators and generals. If you have influence over something, you have a powerful effect on how people think and act. You can have both a positive or a negative influence on someone or something. Octavian served as consul, proconsul, and in a number of other important roles, becoming a true Roman war hero, just like his predecessor, Julius Caesar. Octavian managed to make more friends than enemies, which is unlike Julius Caesar. He was so popular and powerful that the Senate gave him a new name, Augustus, which in Latin means illustrious one or famous, well known. Augustus Caesar was presented the same award as his predecessor for his bravery, the Civic Crown. Today, Augustus is remembered as Emperor Augustus Caesar. He took the name Caesar in honor of Julius Caesar, his predecessor and adoptive father. Augustus Caesar was considered the first Roman emperor, which means he had a lot of power and influence over Roman politics. Under his leadership, Rome was no longer the Roman Republic. Instead, from the time of Emperor Augustus Caesar onward, it would be called the Roman Empire. Remember, a republic has citizens who elect officials who then make decisions for the public, whereas an empire has one leader who is not elected and does not need systems like checks and balances to pass laws. Let's look at this poster one more time. We had slaves, plebeians, patricians, senators, consuls, but even above the consuls would be this emperor who really makes all the laws. Whether he was called a consul, dictator, king, or emperor did not matter. The fact was that Augustus Caesar was the most powerful man in Rome. Many soldiers and generals throughout most of Rome's provinces were loyal to Augustus Caesar. They respected him and do anything for him. This alone gave Augustus Caesar great power. He was also incredibly rich, and he had the power to make other people incredibly rich if they would do what he wanted them to do. Under the Roman Empire, the basic structure of government was similar to the structure of the Roman Republic. There was a Senate with 2 consuls, as well as proconsuls or governors, and many of the same laws. The emperor was the Roman Empire. The emperor of the Roman Empire was the most powerful of anybody. During his first few years as emperor, Augustus Caesar worked to make Rome's borders and provinces secure and safe from attack. The Roman Empire was huge, stretching over thousands of miles, including large cities, vast forests, mountains, and parched deserts. The land of Gaul had already been conquered, but there were still tribes in the deep forests determined to fight the Romans that called them barbarians. To the north of Gaul, there were countless other Germanic tribes that were angry and nervous that Rome would try to take their land next. In the Alps, just north of Italy, there were still many ancient tribes unwilling to submit to Roman rule. There were also enemies in Spain and throughout various parts of Africa and West Asia. Individually, none of these enemies were a real threat to Roman power, but altogether, they posed a real problem. It seemed as though the wars and fighting would never end. Augustus Caesar wanted to put an end to the continuous warfare once and for all. He spent more than 20 years fighting these enemies of Rome and expanding Roman territory to reduce the amount of surrounding threats. Thus began an important 200-year period in Roman history known as the Pax Romana, which means Roman peace in Latin. In truth, things weren't entirely peaceful. Roman armies still had to do some fighting here and there, but there were no serious threats to Roman power. Augustus Caesar preferred to win wars without fighting at all, and many enemies surrendered to Roman rule rather than face Roman legions in battle. The mere thought of fighting the Romans was enough to make most kings shudder with fear. And why do you think people feared those Roman legions? Well, if you lost against the Roman legions, you were destroyed, carried off as slaves to the Romans. Wherever they conquered, the Romans built their roads, bridges, temples, aqueducts, and fortresses. All of those are considered to be engineering feats. More roads were built under Emperor Augustus Caesar than any other ruler. Wherever they went, the Romans also brought their language, laws, money, and arts. Augustus Caesar loved art, and he knew how important it was to all Romans. He paid artists to create some of the finest and most beautiful sculptures, mosaics, frescoes, and temples. There are fewer frescoes today because they have not held up as well as mosaics and sculptures over time. Frescoes and other ancient art from Rome show us how Romans were very talented artists. Ancient Roman art provides important clues about daily Roman life. For example, you can see what type of clothing Romans wore. Can you think of other things that art would have provided clues about? Things that you might eat. Theater, these are theatrical masks like the ancient Greek masks. This is sort of like instead of putting on makeup, you would wear a mask. Augustus Caesar convinced Romans that peace was better than war. This idea was difficult for many Romans to accept at first because they were used to the constant warfare and expansion as a way to sustain the Roman Empire. Roman boys were expected to join the army as adults, and when necessary, to die in battle for Rome. Roman mothers, wives, and children were expected, their sons and husbands and fathers, to march away to war, often never to return. The idea of Pax Romana, Roman peace, was something most Romans had never even dreamed of. Over the next hundreds of years, the Roman Empire had many, many emperors, but none would ever be as powerful or as illustrious as Augustus Caesar. If Augustus Caesar helped bring about the Pax Romana, or 200-year period of peace in the Roman Empire, do you think he had a positive influence or a negative influence over Rome? That's an interesting question. So you heard today that Rome's form of government has changed once again. Under Augustus Caesar, what was that new form of government? An empire. And what types of government did Rome have before this? Well, they had a monarchy ruled by kings, a republic with elected leaders, a dictatorship, which is moving into an empire and an emperor. And then Augustus, he actually took the title of emperor. Julius Caesar set that up for him. Who took it upon himself to continue the alliance with Queen Cleopatra of Egypt? And Mark Antony did. Remember, Mark Antony and Augustus Caesar had been friends at the beginning and then became enemies again. They had an alliance, which was broken. What happened when Mark Antony met Cleopatra? He fell in love with her, that's right. Why did Mark Antony and Octavian become enemies? They both wanted to have more power. Had they always been enemies? No, they had once had an alliance to fight against Julius Caesar's enemies soon after his death. How was Octavian different from Julius Caesar? How does he contrast? Octavian made more friends than enemies, and he wanted peace for Rome. How was Octavian similar, the same, compared to Julius Caesar? Octavian served as a consul and then a proconsul, which is like a governor, and he served in a number of other important roles. He became a true Roman war hero, just like Julius Caesar. He received a civic crown. He was wealthy and powerful. When Octavian became the most powerful man in Rome, what was his name changed to? Octavian changed his name to Emperor Augustus Caesar. And how did Augustus Caesar receive part of the same name as Julius Caesar? He was Julius Caesar's adopted son, and he decided to take his adopted father's name. What are some reasons that Augustus Caesar was the most powerful man in Rome? Well, he was an emperor. Many soldiers and generals were loyal to him. Many people respected him. He was rich and could make those who were loyal to him rich. His name, Augustus, means illustrious one, or one who is famous and has done many great deeds. What does the Latin term Pax Romana mean? It means Roman peace. It's a 200-year period of peace in Rome. In order to create the Pax Romana, what did Augustus Caesar believe he had to accomplish first? In order to have peace, he felt he had to conquer the lands around the Roman Empire first in order to lessen the amount of threats to Rome. How does ancient Roman art give us clues today about Roman daily life 2,000 years ago? Well, it shows their culture. It shows how the ancient Romans dressed. It shows what they ate, what they did for fun, where they lived, the tools they used, their part in important events in history, and etc. Here's an interesting thought question. Why was the Pax Romana such a big change for a lot of the Romans? How did it change the Roman way of life, the Pax Romana? For so long, war had been a constant part of Roman life. Boys were expected to join the army when they grew up, and women were expected to leave their sons and husbands to go off to war, possibly to never come back. So the big change was learning to live peacefully and not have to fight to expand Rome. There was much more time to focus on the arts during this Pax Romana.